Our next speaker is Mr. Imran Chowdhury, Global Data Protection Officer at Al Jazeera Media Network, speaking on today's topic, developing a culture of cybersecurity consciousness. Over to you, Mr. Imran.
Thank you, Melvin, and thank you all the attendees for giving me the opportunity to talk about developing a culture of cybersecurity consciousness. So when we talk about cybersecurity consciousness, we talk about basically in the areas of security, in the areas of information, and how that information in an organization needs to be, how different people, different roles in the organization needs to be conscious about that information. And of course, going more into specific to the attendees, which is the fintech and the people on the and everyone in the financial service industries, how that from industry to industry may change, but in reality, basically there are different types of information that different people need to be aware of. So when you talk about the consciousness, what are you talking about? We are talking about basically there are three levels of consciousness. So you are aware, so you know what you need to do. You are trained, or your training is basically about how to do it, and you have education about why you do what you do. And there are three different, depending on your role within the organization, you may have a different levels of awareness, training, and education that needs to be present. So when we talk about this cyber security, consciousness, there are different levels we talk about. We talk about general, everyone in the organization, there has to be some level of awareness that you might need to have. And what is you are aware of? You are aware about the information that you are dealing with within the organization. So if you are in, say, HR, you are dealing with, of course, information about people and about the person. If you are now talking about in the financial industry sectors, you will talk about people who are now, for example, in the customer service areas, there might be one level of information. If you are talking about those who are basically in the investment areas, they might be having different information that they have to be aware of. And they need to know, then basically, so the awareness comes to two different levels. One is general for everyone, where organization might have devices that they might use, or the organization's IT team. Now, and this is where it comes down to the security professionals versus the business professional, how they need to be aware of different ways of the same or different side of the same basically elephant, right? In the elephant in the room. So each of us look at a different side of the elephant and saying, okay, this is actually the elephant looks like. So unless you are fully aware of the full thing, which is basically when it comes to the education and training to the education, then you start to understand the full concept, and that goes into different roles within the organization. So in the awareness, you become recognized, what you are dealing with. So you are dealing with the information. It might be the information is present in certain devices that you might have. So you talk about that particular things. In the training, you talk about how now I need to protect that information. So if you talk about cybersecurity, then you say, okay, how do I protect that information? If you talk about the privacy, you say, okay, what am I doing with that information? If you are talking about compliance, then you say, okay, what is my regulatory obligation about this information? So that is a different knowledge that you are going to have. And then why am I doing it? What if this is not present? And what if I cannot meet it in that way? Is there any other way I can actually achieve the same objective? So these are where it comes to different level of understanding. So given that it's a fintech, given that we are talking about the digital life that we are actually getting into, and the fintech is taking us in there, let's look at a brief history of the digital evolution. So we see changes on since the first computer devices was developed, and we started to see changes in the way the technology has changed over a period of time. And industries, financial industries, and all the industries and individuals, all of us adopted to that technology. And technology, whether we change the technology or technology changed us, doesn't make any difference. Basically, we are not operating, we are not doing the same way that we used to do 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So the consciousness on different level of the skill set, different levels of people had also need or had changed or and continue to need to change. So the way that we are using the information 10 years ago and today is not the same. Like previously, one of the speaker was talking about that he's receiving the request, or the customer is the bank is receiving the request from customer through WhatsApp to do certain transaction. Can you really do that in the investment banking and other areas? What is the protocol? What is the law says about that? Because consumer behavior is changing. How do we make sure that we are actually achieving the objective? So that's the knowledge level that goes up down to, because your awareness did not is basically saying, okay, this is what I need to do and I need to protect. So this is basically where it comes to the changes in the digital technology and what happened, and the rapid changes in the last 10 years or so, and more is going to come up in the next 10 years or so. So we see these huge changes in the way of how the information used to be. Protecting the information was in the way that it was before, that you create a secure block or secure areas with trusted domain within your corporate environment. And then you would basically put some firewall and everything to protect yourself, and then you create a DMZ, and then you'll have the whole untrusted domain. That concept doesn't exist anymore, given that we experienced the pandemic in the last 2 years. Last 2 years, we have been, or is it? It's over a year. We have been going through this pandemic, and that changed our lifestyle. That changed the way that we do business. So information is no longer just can be protected inside a corporate environment. Each of us, many of us, are now working from home, which also means that the information is not contained within the corporate trusted domain. It has moved out of the trusted domain. We use mobile devices, which basically are sitting in there, not just our corporate apps, but our corporate transaction of the things we do. There's a lot of apps that we have in there that some of them may not have been vetted. So it cannot be an enterprise security team cannot really protect us from this device that we use, and the way that we are actually consuming, using the information, and even working with those information. So the whole ecosystem has changed, and that means that the awareness level at a different level needs to also change. So we see a digitization timeline. We had in the pre-1990, where the digital data basically was, the business was started to use the technology as a way of developing the business. And then we see from 1990 to 2000, a technology that basically started to connect with the consumers. So we started to see that people and corporations are using, say, the websites and other ways that they're actually now connecting with the consumers in terms of the transaction, in terms of how the technology is being used. And we see the credit card and all those things proliferated from that point on also. In the 2000 to 2010, it became, technology was used to optimize the business. And 2010 to 2020, digital technology is no longer an exception, but part of our everyday business life. So it's a new normal that happened. And now we are entered into a digital life where we basically, our entire life from every movement is basically getting recorded. We talk about fintech. So in the fintech industry, things, we trying to personalize, everything is getting personalized, everything is becoming consumer oriented. So there is a significant way that digital life and how, for example, how our lifestyle, insurance in how we drive our car, for example, that can be recorded, and the insurance company have been using that information in trying to say, okay, can we optimize the driver's insurance, for example. And similar things is going to happen in other areas, right, where basically our lifestyle and that creates the data, and that is going to be used in the way of financial determination in our things. If we look at the modern fintech development, we see that there is changes, there is significant changes that is happening. and significant progress that is moving on, and there is a lot more things is happening. I mean, I see that in the Qatar Fintech, there is a lot of new ideas coming about, and there's a lot of enthusiasm and changes and adoption of the changes the way that our lifestyle is changing, and basically it is changing the way that it's operating. But with that, we also see the cybercrime is increasing. So when you talk about the cybersecurity, we are talking about the data. We are talking about how the data is, the protection of the data becomes more of a challenge, and the way of the complexity of the challenge has been also significantly moved. So if you look into the 1990s and early 2000, we would see attack through the virus and many other things. But today's nature of the changes has significantly changed the way the attack is going to take place. The whole attack vector has transformed significantly. We see a significant risk in the way of our say supply chain ecosystem. So what does it mean is that our understanding of the level of understanding of our ecosystem needs to change. So if we look into it, means that if we look into that requirement of how the environment changed, I actually see there are 4 levels of awareness that organization needs to really develop in the way of their cyber consciousness. So at the core of it is for everyone to have a general awareness about information and about how, it's like in the movies or in the real life, what you see is like US president, when he something happens to his plane, whichever plane he goes into becomes the Air Force One. So right, so Air Force One is not a particular plane. Wherever he is, becomes the Air Force One. The same way, wherever the information is, so you need to understand the information that you hold and the value of the information that you hold. Not all information have the same level of values. So everyone in the organization should understand the information they are dealing with, the devices, that information that is going to be, whether that is their personal mobile device, whether there's corporate devices, anywhere that information is, they need to understand that how that particular information needs to be protected, and they have to become aware of the information within the organization they are holding and what devices that information is residing. This is at the basic level, everyone needs to understand. Then a functional awareness, where basically like HR and finance and procurement and IT, each of them needs to understand their obligation related to the information and general ecosystem that information is residing. What system, what processing is happening, who am I sharing the data with, whether I'm allowed to share that kind of information. So they really need to understand the ecosystem much more in that particular domain. Then comes to functional training, where you now need to become a how. So before is what am I doing in my generally and in my functional areas. Now you need to know why am I doing it, and sorry, how am I doing it, how am I going to protect. So this is the areas where you start to give a functional team also responsibility and professional level. So there is a functional level and professional level where each function, like finance and HR and as such, they need to do their part. They have to understand their ecosystem much better and how they do it. And in the professional level, like for example, you have IT team, you have security team, you may have privacy team, you have compliance team, you have governance team. They need to look at it more why. So they have to start to look at how and why in that particular domain. And this is where I see the level of training that needs to be really adopted by the organization, and everyone from every employee all the way to the executive level needs to really understand that information. The challenges that I see in that is traditional cybersecurity awareness training and has been more focused toward the devices or basically certain mechanisms, but it has not really focused heavily on the information itself. So I think that's a transition that most of the cybersecurity professionals or the training professional has to really do in terms of moving away from just talking about password protection and social engineering and such. Talk more about giving the people awareness about the information that they hold and how they need to protect the information. Does not matter what system that information is deciding. And that's the transition that I do believe needs to really happen significantly to be able to achieve the cybersecurity awareness. And in the instance of fintech, there is also a significant challenges I see in the areas of compliance requirement. What is my regulatory requirement when it comes to the data? Now, that becomes a challenging for many startups, the people who are just starting the new ideas. And this is where basically you have to do the right amount of governance. So the governance of that is a level of knowledge that needs to be still there, but what level that you implement has to be decided based on the amount of data, based on information that you are actually holding. Because you might be having a great idea, and you might be actually using the information. Again, in the fintech, there is a significant amount of personalization that is taking place on an individualized level. And this is where also the regulation, that significant amount of regulation is coming up. And in order for you to protect yourself, because you might actually be slapped with a fine at some point because you have not really done things right, and you might actually see that you have, even though you have a great product, fine has prevented you from achieving that objective. So as anyone coming into this fintech industry, I do believe that they should really understand the regulatory requirements in the way that they're actually using and using the data. So I'll stop right here. If you have any question, feel free to ask me, and you can always reach out to me even after this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Imran. So attendees, if you all have any questions for Mr. Imran, please do send it over to us and we will forward it to him and get it answered. Thank you, sir, for your time and presentation, and hope to meet you soon.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice day ahead. Bye.
You too.